doing?
Good.
Village of Salado, regular Board of Aldermen meeting, Salado Municipal Building, 301 North Stagecoach, Salado, Texas, April 4th, 2019. It is 6:30 exactly p.m. The agenda, you have copies of it, I'm sure. Call to order. Call to roll. Secretary.
Alderman Judson.
Here.
Alderman Hogan.
Here.
Chairperson Cushman.
Here.
Alderman McDougall.
Here.
For a beautiful village. The trees are in bloom. The flowers are beginning to bloom. And spring is here. And we give you thanks. Because somehow or another, spring, summer, fall, and winter all comes around when we're supposed to. We ask that you be with us as a village, and we give you thanks for all that you do for us. Sometimes we take things for granted. Sometimes we bicker. Sometimes we just wonder, what in the world am I doing? What in the world are they doing? Well, help us keep our minds straight. Give us heavy doses of wisdom, and be with us tonight. And especially, do we give thanks for Pat and Kathy and Henry. All of this we ask in appreciation of who you are and what we are about. Amen. May we stand please for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honoring the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. You may be seated, please. We have two citizens' communications. One will be in just a few seconds. The second one will be as we talk about the comprehensive plan. I just remind you, or if you're new here and you've never seen anything like this, that if you fill out one of these before the meeting starts, and if you'll read at the top here, you will hear some instructions like, we're not going to answer anything that you ask. We cannot do that. We will not speak to it. You'll see us taking lots of notes. And somewhere down the line we may refer to it, but we cannot speak after you speak. It's your turn to speak for 3 minutes. Mike, on my left-hand side, will be the point of time. And he has a little beeper on that phone of his. If it goes off, then you no longer speak. When you walk up to the podium, please give your name and your street address. The one who will be speaking now is Darlene Walsh.
Yes, sir. Mayor, thank you. I'm Darlene Walsh, 1001 Mill Creek Drive. Just moved a few houses away from our old house, that's all. But I come tonight to announce at Dolores Marshall's request, and maybe you know Dolores, some of you don't, but she has been the operator of a business at the Spring House on Wall Street for over 25 years now. And she's very successful. She's built up quite a clientele. And believe it or not, and she's in her 80s, and she still shows up every day. And she's having a celebration at the Spring springhouse. So I wanted to just announce, it's Friday, tomorrow, the 5th, from 4 to 7 p.m., and on Saturday, this coming Saturday, tomorrow, also from 10:30 to 7, and she's going to have refreshments, and she's going to be giving away prizes. She's going to be hiding little rubber ducks all over the store with amounts of money to give away and prizes. And so she has a new design team in the store that she's very excited about, and it's just she's put a whole new face on the store. Can you believe that after 25 years? But we just wanted to invite everyone to come and have a lot of fun and maybe win some money or prizes. So, thank you.
We'll continue on now with the consent agenda. A, approval of minutes of the regular Board of Aldermen meeting of March 21st, 2019. Approval of the minutes of the special Board of Aldermen meeting of March 28th, 2019. I will entertain a motion.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second? Discussion. Question has been called. All in favor, raise your hand, please. Opposed, likewise, passes. Number 2, status report. Hi, Grace. I didn't see you over there. How are you?
I'm good.
Good, I'm really fine. And before we begin with the village administrator, I just want to amen what Darlene Walsh said. It would really be good to invite your friends and neighbors to come to the Spring House either tomorrow night or Saturday. She has been very, very faithful in her shop, and it is a great shop. So thank you for the invitation, Darlene. Okay, village administrator status report.
Yes, sir, Mayor. I'd like to kind of roll this report in also with the status report at the police department. We have one item on that particular report. So if I can ask Pat to come forward. Many of you had an opportunity to meet him prior to the start of tonight's meeting, but tonight is a very special night. Actually, Monday was a very special day. Not many people can say they started their new job on April Fool's Day. The gentleman here to my right, and it's no fooling, it's the new police chief. And I will tell you that as city administrator, this staff is extremely excited to have him join this staff and become an addition, and quite frankly, a very welcome addition. A fresh mind, lots of great ideas. But the thing that makes Pat so special from our addition is the fact that Pat has a family that is about as solid as any foundation I've ever run into. And why don't y'all come up? Why don't y'all come up, and Pat, I'll let you introduce your family, and then let you maybe say just a few words.
Hello, Henry. Hello, Kathy. How are you?
This is my wife, Kathy. We've been married, I think. Going on 25 years. Daughter Anne Marie, she's 17 years old. She's a junior at Holy Trinity High School in Temple. Our son isn't here. He's living in Oregon, managing a store out there with his girlfriend as she finishes up veterinary medicine school. So excited to be here. I'm really looking forward to getting back into the job. I've been out of it for about 5.5 years. I've been running the police academy at Central Texas College. I trained some of the officers here during that time frame. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know everybody in the community, and you'll see me out quite a bit.
It's really good. Goes to Holy Trinity School, and you're going to be a pharmacist, are you?
Yeah, I want to be a pharmacist or chemical engineering.
And you're going to the Naval Academy. I'm so glad.
She didn't say that.
I'm gonna be an Aggie.
Oh, geez.
Hey, maroon's a shade of scarlet. Go Bucks.
Ohio State.
I'm a Buckeye.
Mayor, I also want you to notice something. For the first time since I've been here, we've had somebody walk in this building that has more flags and colors than maybe a former general or a retired general, and I just wanted everybody to notice that.
You made me put them on.
They look very nice. I know they're well earned,
Thank you.
knowing you.
Thank you.
Glad to have you on board. Thanks. Thanks, sir. Thank you. I will tell you, it's a true breath of fresh air. I think it's going to be a great addition, and you all need to take an opportunity to get to know him, and I think you're going to see some real positive things coming out of Pat and the police department. Let's go through just a couple of quick items. First of all, status report on the wastewater project. The new Salado wastewater system, I guess we can say much like the Ohio State University, we can say the new wastewater system is up and running. It's accepting wastewater when folks start connecting. There's a startup process you go through on these, and that's what we're in the middle of right now. Materials, chemicals have been delivered. We have several customers that are in the process of locking in their permits to begin the process of connecting. We're collecting impact fees, so we really are, it's all real at this stage of the game from here on out. So it's kind of exciting. Jacob, CH2M Hill representatives, the contract operator for the wastewater system, are on the job. Some of you had the opportunity to go tour the plant at the last meeting, and we appreciate you taking the time and showing others what you saw, and it's great to hear the stories and hear the input. We at some point in the coming weeks are going to try to do maybe a community christening, if you will. And don't ask me how we're going to christen a wastewater system. We've given a lot of thought to this, but you know, maybe the first flush, something like that. But you know, just kind of beware. We're hoping to do that where we can get some of our federal representatives as well as our state representatives to come down and participate in what really is a significant project and a significant milestone for this community that actually should help set the tone in the future of this community. As I mentioned, we're collecting impact fees. We've got some that are coming in paying the full amount, and some that are doing the installment agreement. We're continuing to meet with customers on the impact fee data and to answer questions, and we'll continue to do that and be available when they need us. The second training session is being scheduled for plumbers and electricians. We had about a dozen that attended the first, and we've got about another dozen who have come in subsequent to that and said, can we have one too? So we're planning that. As you know, the plumbers and the electricians have to go through a training process in order to install the grinder pumps that we've acquired. The village staff and engineers are working on a plan to redirect flows from the stagecoach plant to the new treatment plant so the stagecoach plant can be decommissioned. We're trying to get that done as soon as possible. We'll keep you updated on that. There's a lot of pressure, obviously, from the stagecoach. They're very anxious to get rid of that plant so they can get on with some of their improvements, but we also need to be extremely careful that we don't misstep and potentially create an environmental issue, and we don't want to do that. So that said, things are very, very busy on the wastewater front right now. Status report on the Old Mill Road Arrowhead intersection. As you know, we had a significant water leak that was detected west of that intersection several weeks ago. There was some initial thought that it was a groundwater seepage issue, but it turned out to end up being a leak that the Water Supply Corporation had. They repaired that leak. The roadway surface and the subgrade were damaged as a result of the leak. You all saw the cracked pavement and the cones out. You wondered why we had them out there and why we weren't out there putting asphalt down. And it was because that area was super saturated, and it was important that we got that subsurface dry before we came back in and put the asphalt on top of it. We've completed that repair. I will tell you this, and that is there's a very likelihood in the next 12 to 18 months that we're probably going to want to go in there and actually repave that intersection in full because there's some rippling and some carpeting that's taking place over there. But we'll continue to monitor, and then if we have any potholes that start jumping up, but the main problem has been resolved. Status report on the Salado ISD right-of-way acquisition. Notice of the proposed annexations was mailed to the various service providers and property owners in the areas last week. Service plan for the area is in the process of development, and it will be released on April the 25th. That's the plan that shows what services will be provided to the annexed areas. Public hearings on the proposed annexations will be held on April the 29th and May the 16th. In fact, next week we'll have advertising for those public hearings beginning in the newspaper. Annexation ordinances will be considered by the Board of Aldermen on June 6th and the 20th, and of course once we get the second reading of that ordinance approved, we can go ahead and amend the map and those properties become part of the village limits. So we're moving forward with that very quickly. Status report on the Main Street Improvement Project. Construction is expected to start in May. That's still the latest we're hearing from TxDOT. You know, this project involves construction of sidewalks on both sides of Main Street, drainage improvements, decorative lighting, and parking improvements. The project will involve the installation of construction barriers, and I want people to understand that. When TxDOT comes in and does a drainage improvement project like you're fixing to see in some of the sidewalk improvement project, they go in and they install, they don't go like in the wastewater world where you can go block by block or property by property and block things off. You're probably going to end up seeing a series of barriers and some long barriers go in that will sit in that construction zone and gradually make its way down Main Street as the construction continues. It's not going to be sightly. The contractor is aware of the the need to keep driveways open if at all possible. And you're going to be probably hearing more of that if you're a local business owner. You'll be hearing from them in TxDOT in the coming days as they prepare for the start of construction. But I say that because it's not going to be real sightly, and it's kind of hard to make those water-filled barriers attractive. But just kind of keep in mind that that's going to be the case. A section of Main Street, as you know, near Rock Creek will be closed for several weeks during the construction as they're pulling out that large drainage culvert that runs over Rock Creek on Main Street. Have no fear though, there will be a very well-signed detour that will be in place to keep traffic flowing and keep traffic moving on both sides of Main Street without hopefully too much inconvenience. The project will take about 18 months to complete, so just kind of mark your calendars. So you're talking the closure on Main Street will take place in January of 2020. So this coming January is when you'll see that closure take place. They're going to try to keep it closed during the downtime for our local businesses, even though there really is not a real downtime anymore. But it certainly is the less busy time in that January, February time frame. And lastly, a status report on the May 2019 election. The deadline to register to vote for the election was today. The first campaign finance deadline was this week. Early voting will begin Monday, April the 22nd. So that's right around the corner. It ends on Tuesday, April the 30th. You'll be able to vote early at the Civic Center, as always. That's also where Election Day voting will take place. Election Day, mark your calendar, is May the 4th, and polls will be open on that day from 7 to 7. And that's all I've got, Mayor.
Well, the dream has come true. We have worked very hard to get that wastewater project. And Don, thank you for all that you've done to get that online. Do we have customers?
We have customers starting to sign up. Yes, sir.
I'm glad to hear that. That's really good. In the old mill intersection repairs, it's really nice to drive down that road now and not lose the right tire off your car if you're coming to the city. It's exciting about the Salado district, and that's really good. And the Main Street improvement project, that was a gift to the village. It really was. We had to go through a grant system to be able to do it, but we had help with that. Now, the thing I want you to remember about this is 18 months, and it starts in May. It's going across the major holidays. So I want you to help me get the word out to the businesses, to the chamber, Chadley, we need to start planning for what we're going to do. We don't want those dates just to come upon us. October, November, and December is what many of our stores depend on to get us through January, February, and March. So, again, making plans, thinking away of what we can do and how we can do it to really make this year's Christmas season, Thanksgiving season, and all the other times. And we've got 3 people here. Amber is not here. I don't think I can see her walk in. But you're probably wondering who some of these people might be. You've never seen them. But I'd just like to give them the opportunity to stand. These are the people who are running for Aldermen. Linda Reynolds, would you stand, please? And there she is. Stay up there, Linda. John Cole, would you stand, please? There's John, right there. And Rodney Bell, would you please stand? Well, here's 3, and Amber Danker, really Amber Preston Danker, is the 4th that is running. So, people have had now the opportunity to see you, and then they're going to have the opportunity to hear you at the forum. So thank you very much. Pat, I can only echo what Don has said. Your reputation precedes you. Even some of your police officers on your force were trained by you. So you're going to see how good a job, or you get the opportunity to retrain them again. But I'm glad you're here. And if you haven't met Kathy, and if you haven't met Emery, take the chance to do it. They're a delightful, delightful family. By the way, I don't think I would slap the new police chief like Kathy did. That might not be too very wise to do something like that. But nonetheless. Salado Fire Chief, status report.
Sure. doesn't look like Shane's here yet.
He's not on time, it usually means that it's serviceable. And our tourism director's report.
Are y'all good?
Okay.
Is this supposed to be this?
Probably. Slide it around.
Should I swing it over?
Yeah, swing it over.
It's a little late, but.
That's good.
See, an Aggie can figure things out.
Right. Yeah. Flip it upside down, maybe it'll work. Things are going well in the marketing department. We've basically been running a couple of ads. You've already heard about a few of them. The thing I want to update you most on right now is some social media ads that we started running. So we have ads that are just general internet ads that are going to people, whatever they're using, whether they're using an app or whether they're using a website. Then we have social media ads. And those so far have been performing really well. So the average for the tourism industry is 0.9% click-through rate. So 0.9% of the people that see it will actually click on it, which sounds really low, and it is. It's just the nature of the ordeal. But ours were 2.05%, so over double what we would expect them to be. So that's really no real explanation for it, other than maybe good wording and maybe some good pictures, but it seems to be working well. And then another interesting bit there is that we're running it all through the social media ads are running on Facebook only right now, and they're running around the state in all the major metropolitan areas plus some smaller areas. And throughout the campaign, we are monitoring sort of those click-through rates and how much it's costing for us to get someone to click on an ad, how much we're having to spend before they click on it. And we noticed that for whatever reason, in this last campaign, Houston was getting really expensive, spending $5 to $6 per person to get them to click on an ad. It's just not worth it at that point. So we actually got them out of the campaign and then focused on Austin and San Antonio. They were just performing better. So throughout the campaign, there's all these things that are happening. We have people that are monitoring this for us, and we talk weekly about the things that are happening, what we can change to try to make it more effective. Yeah, so those are going well. And then I did want to note also that so far there's been over 1 million people that have seen the ads, and then there's been several thousand that have actually clicked on them. So we're getting really good engagement numbers there. So. And then just an update on events. The last weekend, as y'all might have seen, went really well. It was all the community doing it, but June Salado Winery's event at the winery, and then also the Chambers event at the Wildflower or at the Civic Center, and thousands of people came to each of those events, and I heard good things from both of those organizers. And then we've got summer stuff coming up. Texas History Days. I'm working with them pretty intimately to try to get that event going smoothly.
In this weekend?
And this weekend, Packard's back in town. We should make that a song. But no, they've come back and they're excited. I've been in touch with them for the last year trying to put the pieces together. The first time, historically they had it at the Stagecoach, as you know. This is the first time in their organization's history that they've split it up. They're staying at the Stagecoach, the meet is at the Civic Center. Tomorrow night they're having a deal down by the creek at Berrier, which should make some pretty cool photos. So they're spreading it out, and it's the first time they've ever done that, so we'll see how it goes. But they do plan on coming back to Salado again next year. So
there will be a parade if you're downtown on Saturday. We understand rain or shine. There will be a parade. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so they will be taking all their cars. They've got about 45 cars registered, and which is actually, so when they moved here, back when they came back to Salado, they've actually tripled their attendance just because they were out in Kerrville, and we're more attractive than Kerrville guys. So that's so it was really flattering to know that people actually wanted to come here. They didn't want to drive that far. So But anyways, 45 cars, they're going to be taking it down the feeder road to 2268 and then all the way up Main Street, sort of to relive that tradition. So they'll be escorted by some of our police officers and hopefully a fire truck as well. But yeah.
Very good, Chadley. Very good. Katie, what is happening this weekend where you are?
Our 3-year anniversary is Saturday, and it's happening rain or shine. Real Live Mermaid is coming out, and we'll have some new beers on tap.
That's good. Things are going to be all weekend,
Just Saturday.
and everything is free. How did you get the whole Packard football team down there? Chadley, how did you get the whole Packard football team down
How did I get the what?
there? Football team.
Oh.
He's got Merle's hearing aid.
Right. I was just saying.
Well, it's a big weekend, and you're right. Well, we're going on to number 3 now.
Could we ask some questions of the city administrator?
Oh, sure. Would you like to do that?
I don't know anything about the fact.
Don, just going back to echo some of the comments that the mayor said about the Main Street construction project. The estimated cost is around $4 million or $5 million.
Yes, 4 to 5. They're $1 million over budget.
And then they're going to start in June. And I don't think that that we've really emphasized what this is going to do to a business. So if I have a business down there on Main Street, I'll see equipment in front of my parking spots. I'll see parking spots that are closed and being used, and while sidewalks are being installed.
But let me say that the first thing you're going to see that I think is going to open people's eyes probably more than anything else up front is they're going to see where the state right-of-way line is on their property. And I think that is going to be a significant eye-opener for many people. They're going to see improvements being done on land that they think is their property, and in reality it's state right-of-way. And I think that's going to be something that people just need to understand that is surveyed out. So you're going to see that, number one. Number two, you're going to see road work in the middle of the road, in lane closures. You're going to see attempts to, as I said earlier, barrier areas to try to keep people, from getting into the areas where they're doing the drainage work and things along those lines. The impact will be significant, and I think it's going to be important, and we've stressed to the contractors through TxDOT that it's imperative that they work with the property owners to try to make sure driveways are left open when possible, to try to make sure parking is not impeded as much as possible, to make sure there's adequate signage, which I think they will. The good news, I will say this, the good news is the contractor who came in at low bid for TxDOT has extensive experience in working in confined downtown business districts. They're not James Construction. They're a company that actually has some pretty good frontage appeal from the standpoint of their people on the streets and their supervisors on the street. Hopefully they'll perform as they performed in past communities. I had personal experience with them in one community and was pleased to see that they actually bid and jumped in, but there's no question it will be inconvenient. And I think the thing that concerns me a little bit is this. We know the hit this community took with the interstate work, okay? And this work is in our face. The interstate work was in our community. This is in our face. This is not putting a stent in the heart. This is a valve replacement, and I think that people need to understand that it's going to be extensive, and they need to be patient, and hopefully they will get done earlier than that. They also understand that this community is built around festivals and tourism, and they are very comfortable in planning around those. The thing that's a little eerie is they start, May, June time frame, and how long is it going to take them to get downtown? And right about that time, is that going to be stroll season? And so I think that they're aware of Stroll and the need to plan around Stroll. They're aware of the activities we have over on Royal Street and try to work around some of those, much like the wastewater folks were able to. So communication is going to be key. We're going to ask that they have a community meeting with the business owners down there before we start construction, if at all possible. So you get to know the contractors, the point people for the contractors, and the textile inspectors that will be on the site.
And what other kind of special opportunities are we going to take to get this information out to the public?
There'll be websites. There'll be a website page that will update the status of the project, much like we did with wastewaters when we went through that. I feel comfortable that Tim at the paper will help us in spreading that word. We'll work with the chamber in getting the word out through there. And of course, the tourism department will also work to try to keep the image and impression clearly that we're open for business.
Okay, what's the final, in 18 months, assuming this isn't lane construction, and it'll be delayed for 36 months or whatever lane construction does. But what's the final vision of this going to look like? Brand new asphalt surface?
Yeah, there'll be a fresh blacktop on top of it. There will be drainage ditches, both visible and invisible, depending on where you are. There will be sidewalks on both sides. There will be ADA accessible points at all of our intersections. There will be handicap signs. There will be parking signs, different types of parking arrangements will be available on Main Street. There will be decorative lighting the entire length of Main Street. I believe we're talking about every 250 feet, something along those lines was the last word we heard. It should be a much more walkable environment, day and night, which right now is kind of tricky at times. So it should be safer and hopefully more attractive.
And then we're going to have some back-end parking, like you see down on Congress Avenue in Austin.
You'll have a mix of parking approaches. You'll have some back-end parking in some areas, which people shouldn't fear until you try it. It's actually, some people tell you that when they get used to it, that's easier than head-in. But you'll have some head-in, you'll have some parallel parking, you'll have some back-end parking, you'll have some angle parking. I think the biggest thing people are going to be surprised at is clearly where the state right-of-way line is. Because it runs right up in front of some of these businesses that I think probably people, because people park there, and we're not saying they're not going to be able to continue to park there. They just will have an organized parking environment, whereas right now they may not have an organized parking environment. There's one of the things I will tell you this, and that is, I hear the comment of what's going to take away parking, it's going to take away parking. It may, at the end of the day, the net may be, there may be a deduction in parking spaces, but I think when you go in and start organizing the parking, you're going to know the number of parking spaces you have. Right now, it's park at will, and depending on who sets the tone in the morning, depends on how many parking spaces are truly available by midday. So if you don't have an established parking lot in your business, so I wouldn't fear the parking fees.
Okay, thanks, Don.
Don, do we have a picture of this? Has textile given us a picture?
No, sir.
Well, the big thing about this, and certainly the questions that Mike asked are good questions, and the answers are good. If you remember what it was like out here when we were going through construction, it was hard, it was difficult, and we never dreamed that it would look like it looks now, particularly around Salado Plaza, because it's just absolutely good. Keep the big picture of what Main Street is going to look like with those sidewalks and those lights 160 feet apart. It will be something that will be just like that, and you will love it. All right. Public hearing and possible action, number 3. Hold a public hearing and consider approval of amendments to the Village of Salado Comprehensive Plan. John?
Yes, sir. I want to say just a few words, and then we'll get Mr. Lasher to come up and make a presentation on behalf of the Citizens Committee that's been working on this comp plan for several months. This item is on the agenda tonight for you to hold your public hearing on it. The Planning and Zoning Commission has held its public hearings on this and has forwarded recommendations. You have before you a clean copy of the comprehensive plan with the changes that have been recommended by both the Comprehensive Update Committee as well as those subsequent changes recommended by the Planning Commission. Earlier this year, as you know, the Comprehensive Plan Update Committee wrapped up the work on a 3-month detailed review of the comprehensive plan, which is our master plan. It is not a regulatory document. It's a document that's intended to be used to, for lack of a better phrase, presents a snapshot of the future of this community and how we envision it and how we'd like to see it. And it's designed to serve as the basis for the regulations that need to be put in place to make that picture a reality. As you know, the Comp Plan Committee met with both the Board of Aldermen and the Planning and Zoning Commission in a joint workshop in which Mr. Lasker and his committee made the presentation of their recommendations. And as I alluded to, the Planning Commission has held a couple of workshops post that workshop where they've reviewed and made some changes. I'll try to touch on some of the P&Z changes after Jim makes his presentation, but I think, Jim, if you could come forward, please, and maybe brief the board on what all the committee came up with.
Good evening, Jim.
Members of the board, my name's Jim Lasker, and somehow or another I got elected the chairman of this committee, and I didn't vote for myself in that capacity, but it turned out that that's the way it went, so I get to be exposed tonight. First of all, I'd like to thank the people that served with me on it. We started back in September sometime and went through probably February before we really completed our work. If they're here, I'd like them to stand up briefly. There's been a lot of time and effort put in this over that period of time. I'd at least like to get them acknowledged. It's Melanie. I don't think Melanie Hertzmeyer's here tonight. I know Kathy Sands is here. And Ted Williamson is not here either, but he was an integral part of it. Larry Robertson, who has now moved on to Oklahoma recently, and then Mr. Coacham and myself. And that's the committee that worked through the entire process together. I'd start on the basis of what we were asked to do, and that was really to review, update, and recommend a plan that was done by an extremely qualified person 14 years ago, Dan Sefco. He's very well known in that industry for planning and development, and it's kind of interesting to have to follow someone of that pedigree. But anyway, we did the best we could. We certainly are day in, day out professionals like he is, but we did the best we could and came up with recommendations that were consensus really with our committee on almost entirely. A few discerning moments, but not many. Anyway, I'd like to just say, yes, we started with a 14-year plan, and a lot of things have changed in Salado, and they're continuing to change. It's really hard right now. We're kind of in between the old time and the new time, and it goes hand in hand with the Main Street project, sewer project, lots of things changing. It's very, very dynamic community right now with lots of responsibility to youth people, and with the community's feedback, hopefully we'll end up with something very nice that we will all enjoy for a long time to come. No, I'm not looking forward to 18 months on Main Street as living on Main Street myself, but I would say just briefly off the comp subject, I wanted to commend the construction company. I thought the utility construction, being in that business a long time in the past, did an excellent job and cleaned up behind themselves, and I was pleased overall with the work they did throughout the entire project, and I'm hoping for the same with TxDOT's construction company. I'm hoping. But anyway, I wanted to commend them for that, and then I too am looking forward to 18 months from now. It'll be great when it's finished. I completely agree, and it'll be a new phase and a new beginning on Main Street, and I think after that's over, then we can all settle down and get back to things on a normal basis. Anyway, growth sometimes is painful. It almost always is painful in some respects, but in the end, if you've worked hard at it and you have a good plan, hopefully you'll end up with a better product than you had before it started, and that's the goal. Anyway, as you said, Don, better than I can, the comprehensive plan is a guideline only. Our recommendations are just that. The Planning Commission, I understand, made some changes to it that they thought were appropriate, and I know you'll address that. And we made recommendations based off of what we thought was appropriate as well. So it falls in your hands at this point, and y'all can decide to do whatever you want. My feelings won't be hurt if things are changed in any way, shape, or form. Lastly, I'd like to say, even though this was kind of an interim look, as I would call it, with respect to the comprehensive plan, I would, and I think our committee would strongly recommend in 3 to 5 years from now, another hard look at this and a plan, not update, but a new plan unfold from someone like Mr. Sefco or some other reputable firm to come in here and do a complete review and overhaul of this updated plan that we're presenting tonight. With respect to that, it's really impossible for me, unless I had a long time at this podium, to tell you all the things we did. So my effort is going to be very similar to what we did with the Planning Commission, and kind of hit the high points, what we thought were meaningful points. I'm not going to cover all of them right here tonight. It would be too lengthy, but you have that in your plan. I believe it's on the internet at this point, so other people can see it. And please do what you wish with it. And because I won't be able to give you a detailed presentation tonight, I'm certainly here to answer questions, and Kathy's here, and we'll do the best we can if you have questions about what you've been given. I would start, the report itself from Dan, Mr. Sefco, had about 9 or 10 sections in it, and I'm going to kind of go through each section, if I may. But summarily, on every section of that comprehensive report we were dealing with, there were obviously some outdated things in there that had to be addressed, things that changed in the community, the city government, the wastewater system. Lots of things have changed in there, so we simply tried to update those things and bring it to a more current state in there. So in each of these sections of the comprehensive plan, those matters were addressed. I'm not going to repeat that in each section, but we did do that. We updated it, and in some cases we made recommendations on top of that. But I think by and large, my comment with respect to the comprehensive plan is we didn't do a lot of changing. We did a lot of updating, but we didn't do a lot of changing. I mean, it was a good plan 14 years ago. It needed to be updated some. And then there's some problems and issues that come forth as a result of the growth of Salado in the past 14 years. So, and that's for y'all to deal with. Moving into the specific sections, I'm going to read these rather than just talk off the top of my head, because I'll forget some of it. But part one is the foundation, the original first chapter of the report. We again talked about eliminated dated statements that were in there, and we did such things as update the charts and exhibits in each one of these sections that we were dealing with. Those are supporting, by and large, to the verbiage that is in the report itself. Let's see, I can hardly read this. My glasses is so dark, but we changed or added definitions for bed and breakfast, which wasn't really addressed at that detail level 14 years ago. We added short-term rental definitions. We added mixed use, commercial / residential use to the land uses, and we also, well, I already spoke to that, the definitions for the land use and mixed use as well. So, wasn't a lot to add to that section right there, because it was just the overall foundation of the report. Section 2 was guiding principles and actions. We added language encouraging the potential creation of impact fees from developers to help fund improvements needed for high-impact land uses. One of the things we saw and discussed at length was the encouragement you'll see in the report relative to a review of the parkland dedication requirements y'all have. We kind of felt like they were a little light. We relied on parkland as a whole in the city, and we think that when new development comes, that the existing ordinance on that could be beefed up more, and we'd have a better park system instead of just, as we have now, developers will most likely come in and pay the fee and eliminate the park because it would be less expensive for them than developing their parks with their subdivisions. So we want to encourage the city to adjust, revise that parkland ordinance to foster more parkland development within these new projects that are coming for us. So that was primarily what we did in there, but the impact fees is a very good way when new development is occurring for the city to raise money to help fund projects, specific projects that come up in the process of growing. And in that light, there are things like traffic impact analyses that you have to do when you're doing high impact development around the town. And those things will help pay for those kind of expenses that are going to come forth as you see the town grow. So by and large, it was just putting in the recommendation that we're encouraging the creation of impact fees from development projects forthcoming on a stronger, more identifiable basis than currently exists. Part 3 was future land use. We updated our maps of the proposed historic district, expanding the boundaries of the district to include the Methodist Church, the Salado Cemetery, the West Cemetery, the Fowler House, and Robertson Ranch Plantation. We didn't reduce the historic district at all in terms of its boundaries. Part 4, the transportation plan. We updated that to show a northeast extension, suggesting a northeast extension on Farm to Market Road 2484 to see future development on the eastern side, northeastern side of the village of Salado. And we also added, in terms of streets, we added Stennett Mill, Hester Way, Chisholm Trail, and Blackberry Road 2, and we eliminated Van Bibber and Main Street from the list of collector roadways in the plan. We also eliminated references to bicycle lanes and added language indicating consideration should be given in the planning and design of walkways to make them bike-friendly when possible. On the public facilities plan, obviously, we added language to reflect the addition of the village's new wastewater system and future system expansion plans, and sections encouraging the development of public restrooms and public parking in high traffic areas, i.e. mostly Royal Street and Main Street is what we're talking about there. Historic preservation strategies. This is probably the most significant thing we discussed in terms of a change to the status quo, and that regards this particular matter, and I'll get to it in just a minute. But we, first of all, expanded, as I said earlier, the historic district boundary includes several historic sites. I went through those earlier, so I don't need to go into that in detail again. And then the important one was we added language indicating the need to establish a historic overlay district with regulations specific to properties located within the boundaries of the historic district, and we added language encouraging those planning to develop within the historical overlay district to voluntarily seek input from the Salado Historical Society on their development plans. I know that was an issue with the Planning Commission. I think Don will speak to you later about that and answer any questions you have on that. Part 8 was corridor design studies, and we talked about that at length in restricting big box development in the Salado area, Salado proper area, and we were recommending that the maximum size of individual non-residential structures on the interstate be a maximum of 30,000 square feet, and on Main Street, more importantly, a maximum square footage of 6,000 square feet. So, trying to restrict the development and keep things more in line with the flavor that Main Street currently has, and try to eliminate the bigger boxes close to the community, the village itself, and push it probably further to the west is where it's going to go. And in the last section, the community livability, we addressed some things about subdivisions and the responsibilities of maintaining their entries, and it's worded in that capacity so that they would have to pick up responsibilities, not leave it to the county or the city to manage those things as new projects are built. And very importantly, we just added some language to encourage and strongly encourage and remind the board of the environmental sensitivity to Salado Creek, not only environmental, but the beauty of the town that comes through. So anyway, that's kind of a nutshell of what we were doing. Kathy, do you have anything?
I think that's good.
There's some small things, not so small, but other things we could talk about. But if you've had a chance to look at that, we'll try to answer your questions now.
Questions to Jim, please?
Mayor, let me jump in and talk just a bit about the Planning Commission, and Katie's in the back and she needs to jump in and add. I'll try to best sum it up. They made a few odd and end adjustments that were not substantive, but they were tweaking, if you will. But they had a couple of significant changes from what the committee had come forward with. And then they talked about theirs at length as far as the thought process. One of those in particular worth noting is in the historic preservation area, whereas the comp plan update committee recommended encouraging future development to make contact with the Historic Society. The Planning Commission felt it probably needed to be more strongly worded to the point that they should or shall be required to contact the Historical Society to discuss their proposed development before moving forward. So that was one change that was brought forward. There also was some discussion at the commission about the bike issue, the bike lane issue, and I think they modified the committee's recommendations regarding bike lanes to try to promote the development of bike lanes in future developments in the area. They're recognizing the fact that it may be challenging to encourage bike lanes or to put bike lanes downtown on Main Street right now or on Laurel Street with the congestion that exists there. But I think there was interest in the committee. The committee's position was that they felt like future developments should be asked to look at contemplating bike lane developments in those future developments from that perspective. They also strengthened the wording a little bit about public parking, as far as expressing the fact the need to look at the establishment of public parking, in particular, as Jim pointed out, in high traffic areas, Main Street, Royal Street, other areas that are heavy from a pedestrian standpoint and a vehicle standpoint. Another change they recommended was they recommended in the economic development piece the potential creation of an economic development commission that would work and discuss and strategize and come up with approaches to try to encourage business development in this particular area and economic development in this particular area. It would be a citizens advisory board that would be appointed by the committee. In addition to those, did I touch on most of them? Yeah. So in addition to those, they wanted to update the maps maybe a little bit more. So I've included a list of all the changes that we will go in and make on the map changes as you finalize your recommendations. It's updating and cleanup because some of the original maps may not have shown certain areas. I've got two things that I want to touch up on this plan also, just from a mention standpoint, and that is where we reference the Methodist Church. It's important that we reference it as the Salado United Methodist Church, and then there's one reference in here where it shows the Salado United Methodist Church being on Thomas Arnold, and obviously it needs to reflect Royal Street. And where it makes reference to the Methodist Church Chapel, it should say the Salado United Methodist Church Chapel. So we're consistent and uniform with what that church is known by as far as its name and position. So with that said, Mayor, that's before you.
Thank you very much. Any questions again for either Don or Jim? Okay, thank you very much.
I will say this, a sidebar for you over the public hearing, Mayor. Jim did a phenomenal job of shepherding a very difficult process at a very difficult time of the year, because they started before Christmas and transitioned into, you could probably call it a 2-year project, even though it really wasn't, but it did. It crossed the line into another year. And I will tell you, Katie and the commission did a very good job of taking the time. They did not rush through it, and they did not accept it carte blanche. They went through and read every line, and so both of those committees, the comp plan as well as the Plan and Zoning Commission, deserve a lot of credit. I've been in processes where it was not that way, and I think it's a very effective process here, and y'all did a great job.
Thanks, Don. Let me just add one thing I did want to say, and I forgot, was when we were talking about the overlay. It was actually mentioned, it's not a new concept in terms of development and protections in a community, on special features within a community, and it was actually mentioned in the original report by Dan Sefco. So it wasn't an idea we pulled out of the sky and said, let's do this, just because Georgetown's done it, just because Round Rock's done it, just because a lot of other places have done it. But my personal experiences in Round Rock and Georgetown dealing with those people in the past were excellent, and the defining of the projects as it came through the overlay ordinance was precise and helpful, and actually didn't need to spend much time on it, because it's very well done in that process between, in this case, it would be the Historical Society and the city itself. So what we're looking for there is additional protection for Main Street and developing that and tightening up some things in the zoning ordinance that goes with that will assure us that the town as a whole, that we will respect to the utmost extent the historical values of this town. So just wanted to add that.
This is, as we said, it's a guiding document, and hence the reason you have guiding principles. And what will happen is someone will say, well, what are going to be the requirements of the historic district and the overlay district, and what are going to be those requirements? But this document tasks the village and its leadership with coming up with those based on the vision we've set forth. So we can't answer tonight what the regulations are going to be in the historic overlay district. But what we can say is the fact that on most of these changes that have come forth, there will be an action plan that will be developed that we will bring forward and work through with the Planning and Zoning Commission and this board on the establishment of any new regulations recommended by this document or any changes recommended by this document. So this is the starting point. This is the launch pad for those changes to come. In the historic district, we've talked about the idea of coming up with a diverse group involving the Historic Society, maybe even some affected property owners in that district, and engaging the community in a process where we really truly set the regulations. What you want to do is you want to have a set of regulations where they don't have to come to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and they don't have to come to the Board of Aldermen when they want a building permit. You want to tell them what you're going to allow and what you're not going to allow, and help people understand in the beginning and not get drugged through the mud.
I'd like to say thank you for the privilege of being on that committee, and I hope it was helpful for y'all.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you again. If you've never been to a public hearing, I'm going to come out of the meeting that we're in right now. We're going to go into the public hearing. And it kind of works like this. I will say, first call, and you can come up. There's no one with the exception of one. You can come up, you speak for 3 minutes, you stay on the subject, and you're talking to us who sit here. Number 2, anyone who wants to come up, got the courage up, it's now time to speak, that would be it. If no one comes up, then I go to 3, the end of that one, then we come out of the public hearing and we come back into the regular session of the Board of Aldermen. The time is 7:30. We are coming out of this meeting and we are going into the public hearing. I'm going to hit this one and then Mike, you will come and give your.
I'm gonna move the mic. Mike's gonna move the mic.
Well, okay.
Good evening, Mayor, Alderman, and Mr. Ferguson. My name is Mike French, 201 Parish House Road. I have a few prepared statements. I will echo and amplify a couple of things that Don has already mentioned. I'm here speaking on behalf of the Salado United Methodist Church. I wish to address a few items in Part 7, Historic Preservation Strategies of the Comprehensive Plan as it relates to the new Historic Overlay District, or HOD. Specifically, we would like to clarify the HOD is only for our historic chapel, and the map shows that. As such, we would request that the properties listed on page 7.3 be modified to read Salado United Methodist Church Chapel, and with the location be changed, as Don has already mentioned, Thomas Arnold Road, hadn't been there in a while, to Royal Street. A couple other notes. We do have some level of concern with what appears to be conflicting statements of should and shall and those sections there, because legally I think there's some different interpretations of should and shall. Understanding that this is more of a master plan inclusion. And then finally, Don's touched on this, we could find no information regarding the HOD zoning requirements and restrictions on page 7.2. This leaves open the issue of what, if anything, we would be required to do beyond what we're currently doing to maintain and sustain the most visible symbol of our church history and ministry. A couple other just points. I think it's right that we should be updating the overall comprehensive plan. I'm somewhat disappointed that nobody in church leadership had any conversation or any awareness of this. Past years, council chair, myself, current year's council chair, or the senior pastor, Dr. Nasser. So the only time that I heard this is that I was coming to a zoning meeting and on another topic listening, and I heard that we got the chapel going to be in the historic overlay district. We're already got lots of markers on that, and we're definitely loving on that as much as we can. And we have a park that's going to be a part of the comprehensive plan, and we see lots of people out there using that Berrier golf course. I guess we got to really find those markers where the T's are a little better. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. We're in the first call. If anyone else would like to speak, please come to the microphone. Second call for anyone who would like to speak, please come to the microphone. Third call for anyone who would like to speak, please come to the microphone. This is the final call. The hearing is closed. It is 7:35, and we are now going back into the regular Board of Aldermen meeting. The approval of amendments to the Village of Salado Comprehensive Plan is before you. To be able to discuss it, we have to have a motion and a second, and then we can go into discussion. I will entertain a motion now.
Mr. Mayor, I move we accept the plan as presented with the following amendments. On page 510, the last sentence, substitute the word lanes with trails. On page 7.4, the last sentence, substitute the word require with encourage. On page 7.3, add the word chapel to Salado United Methodist Church and change the location to Royal Street and include the recommended map modifications listed at the end of the document.
Second. Motion has been made and seconded. Discussion, please.
I'd also like to offer the following amendment to the amendments. On page 25, principle number 7, action 7.1, add a final bullet under it that said underground utilities. On page 45, in the transportation and parking issues, I'd like to add a word, a sentence, provide adequate lighting according to TxDOT standards for your streets. And then on my final amendment is on page 93. In the final bullet underneath the homeowners associations, add a underground utilities are required or encouraged.
Do you, Mike, want to consider all three in one amendment, or do you want an amendment dealing with each one of these?
I would ask that the ones I just be added be to Mr. Coachman's amendment, and have a discussion on that.
I will accept the amendments to my motion if Andy will second it.
Second. Discussion, please. All in favor, raise your hand, please. Opposed, likewise. Passes. Now we have an amendment, and it's a little bit different than what we started with, and it's on the floor. We have now added the changes that Mike wanted to, and they have been accepted. So, is there any other discussion that needs to be done here? Do I hear the call for question?
It would be to approve the comp plan with all amendments presented.
Do I question? All in favor, raise your hand. Opposed, likewise. Passes. You worked hard on this plan, and I thank you very much for it. You really discussed very good issues, and you're exactly right. And the time will come when a comprehensive plan, this one, will be, or will need to be rewritten. But until then, you've done an excellent job. Going on to number 4. A, consider approval of the second and final reading of an ordinance of the Village of Salado, Texas, amending ordinance number 2018.13, section 1, subsection B, paragraph 1, to add reference to an exception for certain septic systems, and adding a new paragraph 3, an exception for septic systems installed on or after April the 2nd, 2011, and before April the 2nd, 2019, and providing for the following findings of fact: amendment, repealer, severability, codification, effective date, and proper notice and meeting. Don?
Yes, sir. Mayor, members of the board, this is the second reading of an ordinance you adopted just the other day. It basically is amending the mandatory connection ordinance to recognize an exemption that you've chosen to grant for recently installed septic systems, specifically for properties that have installed a septic system on or after April 2nd, 2011 and before April 2nd, 2019. It's an 8-year provision. The way it works is the fact that it doesn't mandate that they have to take the exception, but it gives them an exception if they don't want to connect at this time. But the way it works is this, and that is if you've installed a septic system in that 8-year window, when that window expires, you're obligated to connect if you choose to exercise that exception. So it's before you tonight for consideration for a second and final. We've strengthened the language to note that this exception only is applicable to the initial users on the system, the initial customers on the system. So it's before you tonight for consideration of second and final.
Questions to Don, please. If there are no questions to Don, I'll entertain a motion, please.
Move to approve the ordinance on second and final reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Discussion, please. Question has been called.
I was in the middle of discussing. Okay, Don, can you run this by again, that this is creating an avenue for us to accept sewage systems that, I'm sorry.
Right, the situation is as we discussed at the last meeting, you have some systems in the initial service area, some properties in the initial service area where the property owners have recently installed septic systems. And the idea is the fact that do you want to go ahead and make them abandon the $15,000 septic system they just installed 24 months ago, or do you want to give them the opportunity to get some return on their investment on that septic system before they have to connect? They are not being exempted from the system. They will have to connect at some point if they choose to exercise this exception. But it gives them grace and an opportunity to gain some money back on their investment.
And how many people have come forward and asked for this kind of relief?
Oh, I want to say somewhere in the neighborhood, we had somewhere in the neighborhood of about a dozen or so septic systems, if I'm not mistaken, that were installed in that area, and about half those, I believe, fall into this category.
And how many have come forward and requested this relief under this kind of provision?
One so far, and we've gotten a phone call that we're playing phone tag with a second.
So we're basically crafting this ordinance for 2 out of 130 plus customers and clients?
I think you're crafting it for people who are in that position.
And
it's not being crafted for any one particular property.
And how do we see us performing administrative duties of tracking this and seeing who does it and who needs to come on at a later date and has a flag on their service? And
there are so few that we're potentially talking about. It's not going to be an administrative burden.
And then why was this introduced at such a late part of the game? It seems like this we're sort of way behind. This should have been introduced when we were really putting all these ordinances together. So
actually, it's been discussed at multiple workshops by the board as far as getting to this and looking at this idea.
Okay.
And we've talked about 8 years for several months.
Any other discussion, please? I'll entertain the call for the question. Question has been called for. All in favor, raise your hand. Opposed, likewise. Passes. Going to number B now. Consider approval of the second and final reading of an ordinance of the Village of Salado, Texas, amending ordinance number 2018.12, section 5, subsection B, paragraph 3, to add language clarifying how reservation fees will be credited, amending subsection 1 to authorize the filing of a lien for impact fee installment agreements, and authorizing the village administrator to sign impact fee installment agreements and adding new subsection E to subsection 6 to require reservation fees for properties utilizing on-site septic systems, and clarifying how reservation fees will be credited, and providing for the following: findings of fact, amendment, repealer, severability, codification, effective date, and proper notice and meeting. Don?
Yes, sir. This is a cleanup ordinance to recognize some of the changes that you've made up to this process. It's an ordinance that amends the impact fee ordinance, and as you pointed out, it addresses several issues. Most notable, it addresses the fact that there will be a reservation fee specified in the agreement and paid by the property owner that shall be applied as a credit to reduce the impact fee assessed in accordance with this ordinance when the property connects. Basically, what this means is, we talked about this in your fee ordinance, and that is you have the ability, if you have a vacant property that's in the initial service area, you have the ability to pay a reservation fee, and that reservation fee lasts for a period of 24 months. And what it says is if you pay that $750 reservation fee, and when it comes time to connect, if you're still within the window of that reservation period, that the $750 reservation fee you paid in the beginning would be applied towards whatever your impact fee for the future development is going to come out. So if it's a $3,700, if you're 1 LUE for your proposed development, and you've already paid $750, that means you'll pay $3,000 instead of $750. So it addresses that particular issue. Subsection 5, and my recommendation is you add some language. We can add some language in there to clarify specifically, Mayor. You read it in the caption. And that is property owners opting to pay impact fees in yearly installments must execute the impact fee installment agreement on forms provided by the village that note that a lien will be filed and approved by the village administrator. Right now they're set up, the agreement is set for the mayor to sign those, but as people come in, our thought process is to get them outside the door and to get them in and out. We need to have the authority to do that. We already have been given the authority to work with people in the event of leaks and things along those lines to try to work with their bills, and so this is basically a cleanup item. The property owner, also subsection D is being added to this ordinance, and that's the 90 or the 8-year provision that you talked about just a few moments ago. The one thing I think that's important to point out in this, and that is the fact that if you do choose to opt for that 8-year delay or that deferral window that's set up for a new septic system, you still have to pay a reservation fee. You don't get out without having to pay something at this stage of the game. So this item's before you tonight with that one language change about making sure we add some lien language. That's that agreement we recommend for.
Questions to Don, please?
Don, as I understand from previous discussions, the $750 fee at the end of 24 months goes back to the developer, and we do not keep it.
Goes back to the person who plays the property owner, whether that be a developer or whether it be the owner of the property owner.
So what's the incentive for somebody to just go out and make 5 or 6 reservations on some prospective properties and then just collect their $750 2 years after it expires if they don't do the development?
If they own the property, it gives them the right to do that in a reserve capacity for a period of 24 months, so they can build and do what they want on that property. They lose that reservation after 2 years. I mean, if they got 5 pieces of property, I guess that person would go put down 5 $750 fees.
Yeah, I'm really looking at this as a deposit, and if I don't perform under that kind of language, then I really should just lose my $750. Because right now there's no incentive for a contractor or a developer to go out there and actually pursue it. He can just reserve it and get his money back, and he's nothing at risk right there.
Well, there is a possible incentive to do that. Because remember, you're going to review your impact fee rates, and you're going to review the connection rates. Everything's going to be reviewed. All of that could go up. So what they're doing is they're locking in their rate, like locking in a mortgage for that 24-month period. Then they can use that $750 towards that. If they don't use it, we refund it. They're going to be subject to any new fees or increases at that point.
I understand that, but if I understand the $750 goes back and it counts as a connection or a tap fee or any of the other fees, but if they don't use it, they just get their $750 dollars back. And I think it'd be more fair to our taxpayers if we, change the wording on that to where the $750 is forfeit, since he's really paying the deposit and he doesn't execute his agreement. So that's what I would ask the amendment be if we, for this ordinance, is that money is forfeited like a deposit.
Question, Don, what advantage would Mike's recommendation be? I'm not sure it's not a good one. What advantage would that be to the city, to the village? If any?
Probably not much, because there's not that much vacant property, quite frankly, in the initial service area. And we're talking about vacant lots. Most of the property in that service area has development on it. And the lot has to be vacant with no improvements on it in order for you to pay a reservation. So do we get any additional money out of it? Probably not much. I mean, so I think where Mike's going is not necessarily making the city a bunch of money, but trying to incentivize and get them to do something on their property, maybe knowing that they're at risk of losing $750. My thought is this about that, and that is not a bad idea, but I don't know anybody who's a developer that's gonna rush to get their big building built for $750 and the capacity piece. I think Frank's point is probably a good point too, and the standpoint that, you know, you're gonna have to look at those impact fees, and as the development starts coming in and some of these subdivisions start coming in, y'all talked about the idea of adjusting those fees. You came in, you wanted to set it at a rate that was reasonable for the initial customer base, but you know, you've got the ability to go up to $5,000 plus on that impact fee if you so choose to in the future. So, I mean, it's 61 half dozen others. Y'all's preference for what you want to do.
That property could be sold in the meantime, say he reserves it for 24 months, he could sell that property, couldn't he, within the 24 months?
But keep in mind, the reservation goes away, sale or not, in 24 months. So if you have 18 months in and you sell it at 6 months left, you got the new guy's got 6 months to get the property developed, where the $750 goes away. It goes with the property, but it's still, its lifespan is only 24 months. That's what we talked about the last one. I just don't know that it's an incentive one way or the other. It's kind of hard for me to see that. I think that the incentive is probably more of the risk of impact fees going up. And I think that risk is very real, you know, with some of the development discussions that we're hearing about what's happening on 2268, 2484, and some of those guys. I don't know.
Wouldn't these fees have to be paid in the next 90 days or 88 days?
Yes, absolutely.
Is it either got to connect or
it's
make a reservation?
90-day window.
And what happens after the 90 days?
They'll end up declaring, but after the 90, they've got 90 days to take advantage of the current impact fee. And to take advantage of the overall benefit package that exists, the 4-year payout, those type of things. They start losing the benefits. They're reserving capacity for 24 months, but they're putting themselves at risk if they don't get it done soon.
So what happens after 90 days?
The world starts changing for them. They still have a 24-month capacity, but the potential risk of fees going up. They lose the benefit of the 4-year buyout and any other benefits that you choose to afford to those individuals. You can't make them pay that impact fee. They're reserving that impact fee, basically. You know, as Frank pointed out, it's a benchmark. They're setting their impact fee for 24 months. But they lose the benefits, and I think that's the thing I want to stress. They lose the 4-year payout and those type of things after the 90-day window.
I just think it's overly generous of the city to make that to where we just give them the money back when they didn't really execute their contract. And so they just lose their deposit, is what my thoughts are.
I agree.
Let me ask you, I asked this question last time. Let me ask it again. Let's say a developer comes in and he or she has 50 lots and they want to reserve 50 places on the water treatment plant. 50 times $750 is $37,500. Will they put all that money down at one time in order to reserve those 50?
They'll put that money down when they want to reserve, when they want to make their reservation.
My understanding of this is only for the initial customer area.
Yeah.
It's not for future development.
And you don't have 50 vacant lots in the initial service area. You really don't. I mean, that's the point is you don't have a lot of vacant property in that service area. You've got a couple of larger tracts, and I say larger meaning multiple acres, but not 10 or 15 acres. But you don't have that. But in response to your question, if there were 50 vacant lots on Main Street and you had ownership of those 50 vacant lots, and you wanted to place it all at one time, then you'd pay it all at one time. If you wanted to reserve 6 months at a time, and do the first 50, it's incremental.
But again, this is only good for the first 90 days.
Absolutely.
So it's just for the property owners now that have vacant lots on the initial system. Not for any growth part, not even the part that goes out Williams. It's just the initial system. If you've got a lot on Main Street, basically, and upload. So those 2 areas all we're talking about. So if you have a vacant lot there and you're going to do something with it in the next 24 months, it would behoove you to lock it in. Because if you don't do it within the 90 days, and a year from now we decide that the rates are going to change, they're going to pay the larger rate.
Are you making an amendment to the motion?
So again, your reservation offer is available for 90 days. After that, your world changes.
Right, so I'm making the amendment to the motion that the $750 is forfeited at the end of 24 months.
Point of order, we don't have a motion.
So we could add this into the motion without any.
Okay.
Same as the first reading.
Yeah. It's the second reading.
You can either accept this like this or add in.
Make a motion with the amendment.
That's right. That's exactly correct.
Okay, well, I move that we accept the $750 proposal and add the amendment that the $750 reservation fee is forfeit after 24 months back to the village.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Motion fails for lack of a second. I'll entertain a motion or B if there is one.
I move that we approve the second reading as stated.
Which would include the modification relating to the lien language in the installment.
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Discussion?
Question.
Question has been called. All in favor, raise your hand, please. Opposed likewise. Passes.
Mayor, so again, for the public's edification, because we went around different angles on this thing, the way this works is it applies, the reservation fee applies only to the initial service area, and you have 90 days to make your reservation. And if you don't make it in 90 days, your world changes. You're subject to fee changes coming in. You lose the benefits of the 90-day service agreement as far as installments. So just so people understand, it's only available for that initial service agreement. After that, no reservations. You have to live by, why I say that, no reservations, you have to live by the policy that is set up for future developments for people wanting to reserve capacity, which is the whole enchilada, basically.
Tom, what is your plan for letting those people know about this? What is your plan? How are we going to communicate this?
We'll send an update communication to all the property owners through this 90-day window process to keep them updated as far as where we are and connecting people and encouraging people to keep moving forward, coming forward, and we'll point those out in that update. And hopefully the paper can help us too. And we'll have it online.
Very well.
Those are our three sources.
All right, number 5, discussion and possible action. A, discuss and consider possible action regarding the appointment of members to the recently created minimum lot size task force. Don?
Yes, sir. Mayor, members of the board, at the last meeting, we talked about the idea of creating a task force, basically a limited purpose or a special purpose citizens task force with the task before the members of sitting down and bringing forth recommendations to P&Z and to the Board of Aldermen for potential changes in our minimum lot size requirement. Right now, our subdivision code sets out half-acre lots as the minimum lot size because the community's on septic, with the exception of 5 properties. The community's on septic, and half-acre is what you have to have in order to have a septic system. With the inception of wastewater, a full centralized wastewater system to serve some 100-plus properties, and potential new developments coming in, there was a recognition by this board to maybe take a step back and look at our minimum lot size requirements and recognize the fact that with wastewater, you don't necessarily have to have a half-acre lot. You could potentially have a smaller lot. And so the thought process was that you would appoint a citizens committee, be it 5 or 7 members, and that citizens committee, not having any specific membership requirement, that citizen committee would sit down and meet in public, not in private, and then bring forth recommendations to the P&Z and to the board. So you ask all the members to bring forward names for consideration. And what you have in your packet are the names that we've received to date. And I'll just read those names. I have Bill Doss's name. I have Kenny Ray. I have Melanie Kirchmeyer. I have Frank Walsh. I have Don Krause. I have Jay Rich. And I have Jim Lassie. And any other names you want to bring forward tonight. So you need to decide if you're on board with 7, which I think is what we talked about at the last meeting, settling on 7. And then you need to look at that list and pick 7 members out of this list or any other names you bring forward tonight, so that group can get working.
And how many names are on there? I didn't count it as you were reading them. How many names are on there?
7.
7.
Yep.
So if we wanted to go with a 7-member commission, those would be the names.
Yeah, and I think at the last meeting you kind of there was a consensus that you were going forward with 7.
Any questions to Don?
Don, have all these people committed?
I've not talked to them. Right? I think the thought process was y'all were supposed to visit with them.
I don't know if you had contact everyone.
Yeah.
My 3 that I recommended have committed, yes.
Mike, how about yours?
Yes.
Okay. So you've got 7.
Okay, I will entertain a motion, please.
I move we approve these 7 members nominated to make up the special task force.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Go ahead to call for question.
Question.
Question has been called. All in favor, raise your hand, please. Likewise. B, discuss and consider possible action approving a proposed process for appointing members of the Village of Salado Standing Citizen Advisory Boards and Commissions.
Right now, you all appoint your standing committees like P&Z and the Streets Committee. You appoint those through an application process where individuals come in, fill out an application, give it to Karen, it gets distributed to the board, and then you look at the paper, and with your knowledge of the person and with what you read in paper, you all make your appointments, which is fine. That process has worked fine, but there's been discussion about the idea of changing that among the board, and one of the ideas that came up at the last meeting was the idea of setting up an interview process. And the way the proposal works that you've asked us to bring forward is really very simple. You still have an application. In order to be considered and in order to be interviewed, you have to submit an application, which gives you the base information on that individual. And And then what would happen is we would sit down and schedule a workshop. Either it could be before the regular meeting, it could be during our workshop meeting, that second meeting of the month, where you would sit down and you would interview those folks who have applied and give them an opportunity to tell you a little bit more about themselves and give you, more importantly, an opportunity for you to ask them questions to get a feel for who they are, how they feel, how they fall on certain issues, and those type of things. We're not talking anything more than about a 10-minute interview with each person, just a get to know you type interview. You would issue a public call for applications before you launch into the application receipt and interview process. We have several applications that have been submitted up to this point for Planning and Zoning Commission, because you're going to have 3 vacancies. Mr. Tynes' position is coming up, Ms. Terry's position is coming up, and then you have Mr. Robertson's position filled from that end, and we have several that have expressed interest. I would recommend, if you choose to move forward with this, that we issue a call in next week's paper and get applications to the point that you can maybe sit down at your next meeting as part of your workshop and maybe do your first interviews and use B&Z as your trial case to begin that process if you want to move forward in this direction. If not, there's nothing wrong with the process you got right now.
Questions, Don?
Don, you said, I think you said, for this board to have a public interview?
Yes, sir. I think you do a public interview because I think it's important that you're as transparent as possible and that people hear the individuals and hear from the individuals who are being considered for the appointment process.
But the people are not going to make the call. They're not going to make the decision. This board is.
This board is making the decision. This board's conducting the interviews. I would recommend, if you do those interviews, though, that you go down at the same level with them and sit down at the table with them where you're face to face and not sitting up here
I agree.
and down there.
But I'm not sure that a public interview is proper. I mean, we're all adults. I mean, I'm not sure that that would be received very well. I'm not sure of that.
I think we could limit it to like a 5-minute time period where they can get up, just introduce themselves, say why they're interested and what credentials they bring that to get it about. We don't need to question, we don't need to do any cross-examinations or anything like that. So it's supposed to be a question.
It is, but I just need to process it for me.
It's a little question.
And I assume this is not going to go back and be retroactive to our lot committee.
No, sir. Keep in mind the lot, the minimum.
So Don's sitting out there, he can come up and talk for 5 minutes or so.
He's got the right shirt on, I'll say that much. But from a standpoint of that's a limited purpose committee that has a limited life.
Okay.
If anybody missed that shirt he has on, you don't need to leave here and miss that shirt that he had on. Look at that.
Go Cubs.
There you go, go Cubs.
Yeah, go Cubs, except they're going down the tube this year.
You're going the wrong way. Don, thank you very much for wearing the shirt. Thank you.
What would you think of the idea of doing this as a pilot project for this one time, and then reevaluating how this works? Doing a full interview process, but pilot it on this selection for the P&Z, and then reevaluate after we do that, see if we want to stick with it or not. Question.
I personally think, Frank, that's an excellent idea. My concern with that is that eventually somebody or group, somebody will say, oh yeah, they voted for their best friends, and so now they can do pretty much what they want. And that's not something, I want us to be very transparent. And I think your idea, Frank, is an excellent idea to see if it works. And if it doesn't work, we'll bring it back up again.
Okay, now what doesn't work? Because this board is elected to make decisions like that. We're not elected to make sure we please everybody, even though we'd like to. But you can't operate up here hoping that you please everybody. You got to please yourself and please the board. So this pleasing is kind of a word that bothers me, kind of like transparent. that bothers me too. And I think adults are adults. I don't think they need to be displayed in public. That's my personal feeling about interviewing an adult in public.
I think that's fine. I'll entertain a motion, please.
Your Honor, I make the motion that we adopt this interview process as presented and limit the discussion to 5 minutes introduction from a possible candidate, and use this for approximately an interim situation or temporary basis of 90 days.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Discussion, please.
So let me make sure I understand, we're in discussion now. You said earlier that you did not want to have a question, a Q&A session. You just wanted these people to introduce themselves. Is that where you're going with this? That's what your intention is?
Was the motion not to ask any questions?
He didn't say that.
5-minute introduction in an informal setting.
That's not saying whether we can ask questions.
Would this be in a workshop, Don?
Yes, sir. What I'd envision is you do it in a workshop either before a regular meeting or part of your second meeting in the month workshop like next meeting.
Is our problem, it's not, getting your friends to come on board, because,
That's what we're doing now.
we really need to reach out and, like Don says, put it in the newspaper that we're seeking people and do it in a transparent process like that where we can get some new blood and some additional help in here.
I'd like to be able to ask questions.
And if KD is back there, I'd like to hear what KD would say, because she's been part of one of these processes, and see, if she has any comments on that, if it's possible.
It's possible. Katie, would you like to, for 3 minutes, address us?
In an informal way.
Well, I feel really fortunate to be able to serve on the P&Z, and when I went through that process, there was a form that I filled out. I think someone on the board asked me if I would be interested, and at the time there were several boards being nominated. There was a sewer committee, a Main Street committee. So, do y'all remember that? The Parks Committee. I think that an informal or formal process makes the entire process more transparent and fair, and helps get the word out, which I've seen so many people ask me, how did you get on there? And I don't know. How do you find out about this? I don't know. Just having the place, the seat, put in the newspaper, put on the village website, put on the Village of Salado Facebook page group thing, I think that would drive in some new blood, which is what I think you guys are looking for. We always need additional people, and there's so many good resources in this town and people that want to be involved, and they just need to be asked. Yeah, that's all I know.
Help me out. Help me understand. We want to be more transparent. That boggles my mind when people say that.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah,
because you try to communicate as effectively as possible, but then you have people questioning your decisions, and why did you do it this way? Why didn't I know you were doing it this way? And I think the way to avoid those complications and the people, coming up with conspiracies is to have a consistent mode of communication, whatever that is in place, and that everyone knows that they can go to. And I think consistency and communication are the keys.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
So we have a motion, I think.
What was the motion?
To be transparent.
I need to know. I want to know what I'm going to be voting on. Just make sure we're transparent, okay? Sounds good, looks good, not good. Anyway, go ahead, pardon the
We're
interruption.
gonna put a different hat on here now.
Mike, you've got the motion.
Okay, the motion was to direct the village administrator to initiate a process involving a 5-minute interview with a prospective committee member in a workshop type setting where we can ask questions and go back and forth and have a little discussion. To clarify it.
Now, is that in public?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Yes, second.
Thank you. Discussion.
Your 90-day deal still in
Yeah.
As a 90-day temporary. My problem is that right now we're not overwhelmed with the number of people that come in and apply and want to get involved in. And like Katie says, it's really not known how the process works. And back 2 or 3 years, I did the same process that Katie did. I applied to be on the sewer committee, and that's how I got put on that committee. And provided a little resume so that people understood where I was coming from and what kind of experience I would bring. And so, the concern I have is if we have too many of those, we're going to have to weed it out to who has that type of experience in some kind of process. But we haven't had that luxury by any means, in my experience.
You guys remember one thing, this is a personnel issue. It's adult personnel committee assignments.
I don't think it is. It's an unpaid position, so it's not personnel.
It's not personnel, because it's not paid. Okay. Okay.
Other discussion, please.
Well, I'm going to say one thing. My wait a minute meter is going off a little bit. One part of me says, are we establishing an environment where we're going to discourage people from coming to us? I just want to throw that out there. The wait a minute meters tell me, well, maybe this isn't a positive thing. But again, on the other side, it also, if somebody really wants to serve on it, they're willing to come talk to us. And that it might be a good thing. So I just wanted to weigh that on your minds a little bit, because that's where I'm at right now. So.
We won't know till we try.
We will start the first one with P&Z and issue the public call this week for P&Z with the hopes of trying to bring the number of applicants we've gotten and any additional we get to your next meeting so you can start the process and wade into it.
The Facebook opportunities that Katie offered, but I'm not sure how we go about that in a formalized process, but that was absolutely a great idea.
It's a very good idea.
As well as next door in Salado people.
Yes, question.
Question has been called. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, likewise. Passes. Discuss and consider possible action regarding proposed changes to the Village of Salado's park land dedication ordinance.
Yeah, I think you skipped one there, but we'll do this one and we can go back to
That's
the other
right,
one.
we're gonna do this one, then we'll go back.
This is just pure and simply a status update. I want to let you know that per your direction at the last meeting, we have started the process of putting together a proposal that would modify the parkland dedication ordinance. We talked about the fact that it's somewhat outdated and it's weak and it's not accomplishing the intent that we're trying to accomplish, and that is seeing more parkland as opposed to people paying the city in lieu of parkland. The thing to understand about this is the fact that there are certain parameters in the law that we're going to have to take into consideration in this, and that's just what I want to make you aware of. There are a couple of components that come into play, first of all in the fee, which I don't know were part of the original fee that was put together. And that is we look at market value of land in the determination of how much the payment in lieu of would be. And we also look at the public improvement aspect of it, and that is what type of improvements might be necessary for any parkland to serve that new population that's coming into the community. So translation, I just forewarn folks, the $200 fee per lot is probably gonna be significantly more than that. But when you start taking into consideration what really by law you're supposed to take into consideration in that fee. At the same time, it's important that you worry about exactions and those type of issues as far as the how much land you truly do ask for. And I think there's some averages that we'll look at as far as the total amount of park acreage available per 1,000 people in town, and we'll use that as the basis. But I just kind of wanted to put this on here tonight to touch on it. We've talked about the idea of flipping the incentive. Right now, the incentive says you shall provide 5 acres of parkland, and if you can't provide it, you have the ability to buy your way out of that at $200 per lot in the development. We've talked about flipping that and are looking at the idea of flipping that to the point where you shall pay the city. The initial contract is you shall pay the village a certain amount for parkland development in the future to address the impact. And if you're unable to do that, you have the ability to come in and instead provide adequate land. It's gonna address the issue of how we want to address and how we want to accept floodplain areas, linear parks as opposed to pocket parks. It's going to talk about the size of developments and the type of developments that we want to see certain types of parks in. So it's going to be more of a comprehensive piece than the paragraph we have in our code right now. But I just kind of want to give you a heads up on where we are, and we'll keep you updated. Hopefully it'll take a couple of weeks, but we'll get it to you. Just wanted to let you know where we're at.
So on this one, you're not asking for?
No, sir. I wanted to provide some information to you. Yes.
Okay. Now we'll go back to discuss and consider possible action regarding a proposed rebate program for initial customers on the new Salado wastewater system.
Mayor, this is an issue that we have literally looked every which way at, which you have to, on these type of issues. The thought process in this particular case is that we would be utilizing excess bond proceeds and potentially rebating those to the customer base once they're connected, as a show of we understand your pain and the cost, and we want to try to help you recoup some of the costs that you've incurred as a result of being required to connect to this. The unfortunate aspect of this, as we've talked with our bond counsel, is the fact that it's very difficult to pull this off with bond proceeds. So if you're going to offer something along these lines, you would need to do it with general fund dollars and not bond proceeds. So at this stage of the game, our staff recommendation is that we do not offer a rebate because of the legal inability to do so with bond proceeds. So what does that mean you do with the bond proceeds, the excess money that we've got left over now that we've finished the project and we're under budget? You're going to have under $1 million that's going to be left available, but you're going to have a pretty good chunk of change, we think, when all the bills are paid with this first thing. We're still getting some invoices in. What I think you would do is this. I think you would set that money aside. You set that money aside in a wastewater disbursement account, which is where it's going to be when all is said and done. And what you would do is you would use it for 2 potential expenses. Number one, come budget time, you roll that money or a percentage of that money that's left over into the interest and sinking fund and use it to, for lack of a better phrase, reduce your property tax. You don't have to use it all to do that, but you could use a percentage of it. Know this, and that is to significantly reduce the property tax is going to take a significant amount of money more than we have left over. I feel comfortable in that. But I think that we have committed to the taxpayers across this city that we're going to work in that direction to bring that property tax down, that debt service rate down. So the thought process is we set this money aside, and at budget time we look at where we're at and look and see if that's something we can do. At the same time, we know there are a couple of projects floating around right now with wastewater permits that are pending in the region that we can potentially piggyback with them on. And so there may be a need potentially, don't know this to be the case at this point, but maybe there's a need to talk about applying or acquiring capacity from some of those adjacent plants to avoid us from having to build a new plant. And that possibility is out there. As we know, we've talked about that with one of the plants that said that we'd be willing to talk with you when we get to that point. So you may potentially be able to use some of this money. Not you may, you can use this money if you wanted to go secure capacity there. You could use this money if you wanted to go out and acquire a site for a new wastewater treatment plant that you could build at some point in the future. You could use this money to set up and use as an incentive for economic development. If you've got an industrial developer, a business development, a retail development or something along those lines that you want to, that they're asking for an extension of the line for, you could potentially use that. It has to go back into the system to benefit. While the spirit of the rebate makes all the sense in the world, the legality of it is bond proceeds is very difficult to pass the muster as far as using that to fund the rebate. If you do that, you'd have to go ahead and dip in the general fund. And quite frankly, you know, your general fund, you need to be very careful with your fund balance. It's good right now, it's solid right now, as you heard at the last meeting. But to make a rebate that's worth something for the customer base would be a significant dip into that fund balance. So our recommendation is 86, the rebate program, not move forward with the rebate program at this time. Set those proceeds aside and consider those at budget time to potentially offset debt service for the entire city and not just the customer base. They would benefit too from that debt service reduction as property owners, or even look at the idea of potentially using it for system expansion for treatment plant capacity or treatment plant land in the future.
Questions to Don, please. To be able to get into the discussion.
I move we approve the administrative recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Go ahead and call for the question. All in favor, raise your hand. Opposed, likewise. Passes. Shane.
You left.
I don't want you to miss the opportunity of giving your report. Please come forward. You've worked very hard in writing it, getting it together.
All I got to tell them.
Well, I can't take it to the front again, so I guess so.
Mayor Alderman has a report for the month of March for the fire department. We made 19 EMS calls in the city. We made 24 EMS calls in the county. We had 5 fire calls in the city. We had 9 fire calls in the county. We had 5 motor vehicle accidents in the city. And we had 9 motor vehicle accidents in the county. And that is my report for the month of March.
That's one. You guys work very, very hard. Very hard. As a volunteer fire department. Any questions to Shane, please? Or any discussion you'd like to have with him?
And we do have our bike ride Saturday. It's not looking very good.
Bike ride is Saturday?
It is what it is.
Not looking good because of the weather.
Yeah, it's supposed to rain all day.
All day Saturday.
Is there electric bike?
I don't know that I'd ride an electric bike.
Yeah. Might get a little extra, might get a little extra juice.
Yeah.
Good. Shane, that's an excellent report. Thank you very much for all you do. We couldn't say thank you enough to you. Thank you.
Mayor, along those lines, as far as the weather goes, just so you know, the state's indicating that we're probably going to see anywhere from 1 3/4 to 2 inches over the next 5 days.
It's a lot of rain.
Needed rain.
Yes. Well, we've had a very interesting evening. A lot of business that we've taken care of. I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, let me ask you a question first. We left one thing out extremely important.
Sure.
And you didn't forget it. We need to let the people know this. That we have, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people out there, 7. Grace, back in September when she started, we'll all remember that she was the #1 student at Salado High School in academics. And they're going down the final stretch now. The school ends sometime in May, but there's been no change in the #1 student at Salado High School. Grace is still the #1 student out there, and I'm sure we'll put them for her. Not that we need to, but it looks like we're going to have another valedictorian as one of our students.
And she's well ready to make her commitment tonight to West Point, I understand.
That's why I brought that up, just to make it smooth.
Probably paid Don to say that. Grace, what's it been like? Can you briefly just tell us what it's been like to be a part of this?
Sooner than I thought it would be. There's a lot more discussion. I thought that everybody would just unanimously agree on everything, but it's not like that. Also, I think that people don't always understand what's going on and just misinterpret a lot of things and misconstrue them. But I think if they actually came and listened and instead of coming to conclusions, it would help a lot of people.
That's a very good lesson. That's really good. Michael, were you going to say something?
Well, she made a very good point. If people, I'm not chastising anybody, but if people would come to these meetings and understand the importance of these decisions that we are making, and the signs up here to please turn off your cell phones, I know that, and whispering is very annoying too. I mean, those are annoying because what we're doing up here is darn important, and I don't think it's right to be interrupted by someone who's that rude. I'm not talking about anybody individually, but I've probably done that some myself. But we need to remember that these meetings, just like SISD board meetings, making great decisions, big decisions, spending lots of money wisely. So I would just say that about the importance of this meeting as well as the SISD Board of Education.
Michael, I think that is very well said. Exactly correct. John, you have really helped us with that. And I appreciate you taking your time and filming this, video it. It certainly helps people who cannot come to these meetings. Thank you.
Mayor,
Hello,
can I make a 30-minute statement? I mean, 30 seconds? I could not hear a word that this good student said. And I'm very hard of hearing, and I would encourage everybody to use a microphone.
Okay.
Please. And I am going to bring you a microphone at the next meeting.
A microphone?
I'm
Yes,
going to
you
bring you
told
a
me
personal
that.
microphone.
What do you want me to do with it?
And then I want to make an appointment with Don, because my wife called him, he never returned her call.
Oh, Don.
And it has to do with the family owning the last building on Main Street. I'll make an appointment and talk to her.
Okay.
We'd welcome that. We'd welcome that.
And we're glad to see that you are back in the saddle again and you're feeling better. That's really good. You've been missed.
He has been through a lot.
Yes, he has. Well, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Oh.
Well, second. Is there a second? Second. All in favor, if you'll raise your hand, please. Opposed likewise. Thanks, Chris.